Just when you think the Caylee Anthony murder case cannot get any weirder, it just has. Caylee's mother, Casey, sits behind bars charged with her daughter's murder. As you probably remember, a meter reader found Caylee's skull in December just blocks from the house the toddler was living in. Well, now we are learning that weeks after Caylee's disappearance, Casey began collecting photographs of skulls and sketches of kissing skeletons. Joined us by phone is former LAPD homicide detective Mark Furman and in Orlando, Florida defense attorney Diana Tennis. Mark, first to you. Boy, it's peculiar, is it not?
Well, it's really strange, and I'd like to know the source of the sketches and the pictures of skulls, Greta, but, you know, sometimes it just coincidentally things that people do fall into something that they're involved with, and sometimes they're not connected, sometimes they're directly connected, but it doesn't get much stranger in this case. I agree with you.
Diana, what do you make of this? And is this anyway, I mean, is this sort of just a weird distraction for the rest of us to be consumed with, or does it have some sort of evidentiary value for the prosecution?
Well, I suppose they're going to try to make a lot of what are bizarre coincidences, but you know, even if this were some sort of telling sign, it would have been months prior to the body being discovered or the body even potentially being reduced to skeletal remains. And I don't know that I give this particular woman the foresight to see that far down the road, whether she had something to do with it or not. So I think it's creepy, but I don't know that I put a whole lot of weight on it.
I guess the plot thickens as to that aspect to it. All right, let me turn then to the issue of her ex-boyfriend, Tony Lazaro, Mark, who was wired by police and cooperated with police. Not that he was in any trouble. I don't mean that he was in any trouble. But he was wired by the police and then went and spoke to Casey's brother. What did the police get out of that?
Well, I don't know if they knew what they were going to get out of that, but I think that they have Tony that either because of guilt that he didn't know what was going on, that his suspicion or his belief that Casey actually killed her daughter or was responsible for her death, or there's some other mitigating factor that the police were able to convince Tony to wear a wire. I think it's good police work that they actually go with as many places as they can because they really don't know what's going to turn up because they're still looking for a cause of death, even though they've declared that it was a homicide. They'd like to know, they'd like to fill in between the point the child was last seen in the trunk of the car decomposing and then where she was ultimately found.
Diana, there are 1,100 pages of discovery that were recently released, and in reference to part of it, they have some discussion about what Tony got when he talked to Lee. One of the things I thought was sort of interesting, not that there seems to be much question, but it says Lee Anthony, that's the brother of Casey, said that to Tony, the ex-boyfriend, that Casey Anthony never said anything about a nanny. Although, however, he thought he recalled a Zenaida who hung out at the Anthony home. And you know that Lee's going to be put on the stand, and this whole Zenaida thing will just be put to rest, right?
Well, I'd be curious as to seeing the transcript of that conversation. I'm not sure if what the terminology was used during it, but he did say that he remembered a Zenaida being at the home, and it was obvious that her brother Lee, talking to this kind of insider, and he did not know that they were being tape recorded. It's obviously that Lee let down his guard a little bit and still, I believe in his heart of hearts, believes his sister. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it was interesting to see kind of a snapshot of the investigation in July of 2008. They were obviously in overdrive because at that point everybody had their suspicions, but they didn't have a body. They didn't really have a whole lot, and they were really going, and as Mark pointed out, covering all the bases and then some to try to come up with something.
Diana, do we just have about yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Greta, you know what's interesting? When I sat down and talked to Lee last August in 2008, he was, in my impression, he was very, very convinced that Casey either knew or was involved in the disappearance of Caylee Anthony. And I don't believe that he believed that his niece was still alive. So, you know, the fact of what he was presenting when he decided that he was going to do his own investigation, I think actually put himself on the police radar right at that moment because he was actually, in some regards, obstructing justice.
Mark, Diana, thank you both very much.